True peace. Happy holiday, peacemakers. We're gonna get started here in a sec. Get us going. Happy holiday. True peace. Hope everyone's enjoying their Friday. Happy holiday. We're gonna get started here with our divine supplication. First thing first, I want to give high honors to the prophet, Noble Lawiy. I want to give honors to the divine creator. I want to give honors to those that came after the prophet. I want to give honors to those that came before the prophet. I want to give honors to everyone who will be here in participation with us tonight as we get things going. Islam. All right, so we're going to jump into our divine supplication, get things rocking and rolling. True peace. Islam. All right, true peace, Brother Jonathan, I see you. Islam. Sound real low. I don't know if that's my phone. Let me check.
Might be me. I'm talking low.
Peace. True peace. All right, we're going to get started here in a sec. We're going to pull up the supplication for us. We're going to kick it off. All right, so hope everyone is enjoying the holiday. As I mentioned, we're going to get it rocking and rolling. So as y'all know, we begin our prayers and thinking by using the all. Oh, Heavenly One, the Most High, who is sustainer of all the worlds, we do accept the duty you have lain on us to clean up the filth made by the West and its non-submitting fools. Oh, my sustainer, we beseech you to keep your hand over us, to control the strings of the courses of our lives. Our sustainer, and if we do wrong, please show our divine blessings and forgiveness on us. You are the only one that can raise us true followers of the news bearers, and in thy name, we carry on. All right, so we're going to open up here next with our weekly affirmations, which is actually daily affirmation, which you should be reading, locking in with your family with these affirmations. Okay, so let's jump into these daily affirmations. See, my phone's still glitchy. All right, so this daily reading of the affirmations, like I said, we should be done with your family. They are called the daily affirmations of loyalty of the children of the Elohim, and what we accept as fact. And as they state, we accept as fact the eternal laws of nature as revealed through science, past events, logic, and common sense, revealed as right knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. We accept as fact the highest laws of nature is the cooperation and harmony of all living things. We accept as fact The highest laws of nature is the cooperation and harmony of all living things. We accept this fact that our way of life is a means to the best end. We accept this fact that loyalty is the greatest of all honors and treason is the worst of all crimes. We accept this fact that what is good for the Holy Tabernacle is the highest virtue, and what is bad for the Holy Tabernacle is the ultimate evil. We accept this fact that the Holy Tabernacle is the finest and noblest organization for all humanity, created by circumstances, and the ancient and mystic order of Melchizedek is the noblest of fraternities on and above this planet. We accept this fact that creativity, love, and cooperation are the essence of success. We accept this fact that truth and facts are always and has always been the originator and creator of all success. We accept this fact that all worthwhile cultures and civilizations came about from the ancient Sumerians and Canaanite Egyptians and the Anunnaki, or Elohims from the heavens, without which there would be none. We accept this fact that for the Holy Tabernacle to survive, expand, and advance, we need first of all a revolution of values and thoughts, which must start within each person by being truthful with themselves and about themselves. Therefore, we completely and categorically reject all myths, fictions, religions, and lies that have not been proven. That would include your heavens, your hell, your hellfire and brimstones, your horn and pitchfork devils, your winged angels, and your old man God character sitting on the throne up there somewhere. We deal strictly with facts. If you can't prove it, we don't want to hear it. That doesn't mean we won't listen to you. Just don't expect us to accept your beliefs by virtue of a title such as Reverend, Pastor, Deacon, Imam, Sheik, Rabbi, Minister, Theologian, etc. That is your sensationalism, and we deal with just the facts. We accept this fact that the only true revolution is a war of good against evil, right against wrong, fairness against unfairness, loyalty against disloyalty, sincerity against insincerity, honesty against dishonesty, and this wars fall within each person among the agreeable and disagreeable Elohims that make up your willpower. We accept this fact that the unity of our community and its success will only happen with cooperation with all involved. We accept this fact, the total unification of all humanity on the basis of truth. That is, accepting people and races for who and what they are, respecting their culture, their languages, and their beliefs, and expect the same. We accept this fact that the human race, his biological and cultural heritage, is now under attack by our own morals, our self-righteousness, our desire to control industry. And these things attack the very existence of humanity. We accept this fact that males as well as females are equal in all things and should be dealt with as partners in all matters. We accept this fact that no one race of people is better than the other. In fact, no one wins the race in racism. We accept this fact that communication between different people is the cure to the ignorance that breeds the disease hate. We accept this fact that a good and well-rounded education could prevent most of the ignorance that plagues the world. We accept this fact that the all is just that, the all. You can't take from the all, you can't add to the all. We are all within the all as one. That is our concept of what you call a deity. To the fulfillment of these facts, we children of the Elohim forever pledge our lives, our sacred honor, and our spiritual zeal. All right. So those affirmations is real impactful, and you know they really hit home, especially when you come across information about the author and the one who presented us with these affirmations, and they're trying to paint him in a bad light. And misinterpret what we stand by as a people.
What I pardon about it.
Islam.
I'd like to say something. This kind of reflects on last sermon that we had, but you know, talking about how there is no time and how like visions and prophecies, a lot of visions are based on that truth. You know, there's been certain visionaries that have delved into that, you know, 0 point way back in the day, before computers, before videos and movies and all this stuff we got now. And
right.
And there's things because of the stories, you know, that have maybe been embellished or evolved, where it's like, you know, I play video games that have angel characters with wings in it, you know, so there's like this possibility that, you know, what people are thinking is really the aftermath as the beginning, but it doesn't really resonate with the actual truth. And the truth has a deeper foundation than any type of, you know, winged angel or winged, winged demon type thing. So, all right,
correct.
Cool. I just needed to get that off my chest.
Islam. We're about to get started. We're gonna get our get our prayer on real quick and go over the divine constitution and our weekly reading. Then we'll be open for this week. We are continuing our banking series here, so most definitely we're gonna jump right into that and close out that particular piece of information that we're reading in reference towards. And I do want to actually close the series out with getting into Claude Anderson's Powernomics book. I do want to do a quick deep dive into that. We're not going to read the entire book, of course, but we definitely are going to, go over some of the things that are in the book and kind of skim through it and reiterate a lot of the points that we've been making in this economic series and currency series, and now we closing out with the banking series. So y'all know how it go: facing the east, feet at a 45-degree angle, 2 fingers up, 5 fingers up. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day through His holy prophet, Jurali. Amen. All right, y'all. So let's get into these divine constitution and bylaws. And as they read, Act 1, the Grand Sheik and the chairman of the Moorish Science Temple of America is empowered to make law and enforce laws with the assistance of the Prophet and the Grand Body of the Moorish Science Temple of America. The Assistant Grand Sheik is to assist the Grand Sheik in all affairs if he lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And it is known before the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Act 2, all meetings are to be open and closed promptly according to the Circle 7 and love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Friday is our holy day of rest because on a Friday the first man was formed in flesh, and on a Friday the first man departed out of flesh and ascended unto his Father God of love. For that cause, Friday is the holy day for all Muslims all over the world. Act 3, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice must be proclaimed and practiced by all members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. No members to put in danger or accuse falsely his brother or sister on any occasion at all that may harm his brother or sister, because Allah is love. Act 4, all members must preserve these holy and divine laws, and all members must obey the laws of the government, because by being a Moorish American, you are a part and parcel of the government and must live the life accordingly. Act 5, this organization of the Moorish Science Temple of America is not to cause any confusion or to overthrow the laws and constitution of the said government, but to obey hereby. Act 6, with us, all members must proclaim their nationality, and we're teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are a part and parcel of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live and the nations of the earth. This is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained Noble Drew Ali, the prophet, to redeem his people from their sinful ways. The Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. Act 7, all members must promptly attend their meetings and become a part and parcel of all uplifting acts of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Members must pay their dues and keep in line with all necessities of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Then you are entitled to the name of faithful. Husband, you must support your wife and children. Wife, you must obey your husband and take care of your children and look after the duties of your household. Sons and daughters must obey father and mother and be industrious and become part of the uplifting of humanity. All Moorish Americans must keep their hearts and minds pure with love and their bodies clean with water. This divine covenant is from your holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, through the guidance of his Father God Allah. All right, y'all. So we're gonna get into our weekly readings. I need to make sure I do have text because it's been a while since I checked. I should have it. I should have a copy of the Powernomics book. Hope I saved it because I remember having a copy. Put a copy in. We're putting a copy of it here. See, because I want to make sure we got it. Because make sure we got it. I did put a copy. Did put a copy of it somewhere. Uh, double check. Yeah. No, I'm not tripping. Give me 1 second. We're gonna jump right into our weekly readings, but like I said, make sure I got the copy of the Powernomics. Because I do remember having my copy of it. I just gotta remember where I pulled that copy from. Yeah, because I most definitely remember having it. All right, here we go. Gotta make sure. Look, make sure I send it to self. So we got make sure self got this book. So we're gonna jump into our weekly readings. We want to make sure we got the Power Numbers book from Claude Anderson. So we're gonna do a dive in and actually look at some of the points and things like that the professor was touching on, and see what our intake about the philosophy and formula from Dr. Claude Anderson, what it really entails, what it's really saying, and how it aligns up with everything that we've touched on thus far. So let's get into our weekly readings. First thing first, we start out with chapter 25 of the Holy Quran, Circle 7. I need to know why you couldn't get a copy from our chat. See what's wrong with that. All right, so we're gonna start out with chapter 25, called the Holy Covenant of the Asiatic Nation. And as it reads, ye are the children of one father provided for by his care, and the breast of one mother had given you suck. Let the bonds of affection therefore unite thee with thy brothers, that peace and happiness may dwell in thy father's house. And when ye separate in the world, remember the relation that bindeth you to love and unity, and prefer not a stranger before thy own blood. If thy brother is in adversity, assist him. If thy sister is in trouble, forsake her not. So shall the fortunes of thy father contribute to the support of his whole race, and his care be continued to you all, and your love to each other. All right, so I do want to let it be known that I put a copy of the Holy Quran Circle 7 audiobook in our YouTube video, in our collection of YouTube videos, as well as the oral sayings and prophecies of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. So you all could go back and listen to that from YouTube as well without having to go through the trouble of just reading, reading it from your phone, or if you are reading a book copy, you could play the audio and read along with the book, however you would like to do that. All right, so we're going to jump into chapter 47 and 48. Chapter 47 is called Egypt, the Capital Empire of the Dominion of Africa. And as it reads, the inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanite nation from the land of Canaan. Old man Cush and his family are the first inhabitants of Africa who came from the land of Canaan. His father Ham and his family was second. Then came the word Ethiopia, which means the demarcation line of the dominion of Amexem, the first true and divine name of Africa, the dividing of the land between the father and the son. The dominion of Cush, northeast and southeast Africa, and northwest and southwest was his father's dominion of Africa. In later years, many of their brethren from Asia and the Holy Lands joined them. The Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa, they were the founders and all the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren who sovereign from the land of Canaan seeking new homes. Their dominion and inhabitation extended from northeast and southwest Africa across Great Atlantis, even unto the present North, South, and Central America, and also Mexico and the Atlantis Islands, before the great earthquake which caused the Great Atlantic Ocean. The river Nile was dredged and made by the great ancient pharaohs of Egypt in order to trade with the surrounding kingdoms. Also, the Niger River was dredged by the great pharaoh of Egypt in those ancient days for trade, and it extends eastward from the river Nile westward across the Great Atlantic. It was used for trade and transportation. According to all true and divine records of the human race, there is no Negro, black, or colored race attached to the human family, because all the inhabitants of Africa were and are of the human race, descendants of the ancient Canaanite nation from the Holy Land of Canaan. What your ancient forefathers were, you are today without doubt or contradiction. There's no one who is able to change man from the descendant nature of his forefathers, unless his power extends beyond the great universal creator law himself. These holy and divine laws are from the prophet Noble Drew Ali, the founder of the uniting of the Moorish Science Temple of America. These laws are to be strictly preserved by the members of all the temples of the Moorish Science Temple of America, that they will learn to open their meeting and guide it according to the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Every subordinate temple of the Grand Major Temples to form under the covenant of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and to create their own laws and customs in conjunction with the laws of the Holy Prophet and the Grand Temple. I, the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, was sent by the great God Allah to warn all Asiatics of America to repent from their sinful ways before that great and awful day that is sure to come. The time has come when every nation must worship under its own vine and fig tree, and every tongue must confess its own. Through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honored not the creed and principles of their forefathers. That is why the nationality of the Moors was taken away from them in 1774, and the word Negro, black, and colored was given to the Asiatics of America who were of Moorish descent, because they honored not the principles of their forefathers, the principles of their mother and father, and strayed after the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing. And we have a lot of that today, and it's a great sickness. I'll be sitting in some of these rooms that be talking about marriage and stuff like that, and just having some of the hot topics that be up for questioning from most modern people, and just to hear the perspectives that come out a lot of the times is very crazy. And so you can tell that this is definitely from not respecting the ancestors, not just not respecting the ancestors, but the principles, whether it's scriptorial, biblical, whatever principle they claim to go by. You see a lot of it is mixture of different philosophies and moralisms and things like that. But it most definitely creates clashes, especially between the principles of the feminist movement, things like that we have today, and trying to fit those principles within a patriarchal biblical structure and still expect traditional patriarchal type marriages. So it definitely gets crazy. So we're going to jump into chapter 48 called the end of time and the fulfilling of the prophecies. And as it reads, the last prophet in these days is noble Ali, who was prepared divinely in due time by Allah to redeem man from their sinful ways, to warn them of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. John the Baptist was the forerunner of Jesus in those days to warn and stir up the nation and prepare them to receive the divine creed, which was to be taught by Jesus. In these modern days, there came a forerunner of Jesus who was divinely prepared by the great God Allah, and his name is Marcus Garvey, who did teach and warn the nations of the earth to prepare to meet the coming prophet, who was to bring the true and divine creed of Islam, and his name is Noble Ali, who was prepared and sent to this earth by Allah to teach the old-time religion and the everlasting gospel to the sons of man, that every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree, and return to their own and be one with their Father God Allah. The Moorish Temple of America is a lawfully chartered and incorporated organization. Any subordinate temple that desires to receive a charter, the Prophet has them to issue to every state throughout the United States, etc., that the world may hear and know the truth, that among the descendants of Africa there is still much wisdom to be learned in these days for the redemption of the sons of man, under love, true peace, freedom, and justice. We as a clean and pure nation descending from the inhabitants of Africa do not desire to marry into the families of the pale-skinned nations of Europe, neither serve the gods of their religion, because our forefathers are the true and divine founders of the first religious creed for the redemption and salvation of mankind on earth. Therefore, we are returning the church and Christianity back to the European nations as it was prepared by their forefathers for their earthly salvation, while the Moorish Americans are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and divine salvation. The covenant of the great God Allah, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be longer upon the earthland, which the Lord thy God Allah had given thee. Come, all ye Asiatics of America, and hear the truth about your nationality and birthrights, because you're not Negroes. Learn of your forefathers' ancient and divine creed, that you will learn to love instead of hate. We're trying to uplift all of humanity. Come and link yourself with the family of nations. We honor all true and divine prophets. So we're going to jump right on in. I definitely had a wonderful week and very opening this week. I hope you all have too as well. And we're going to continue where we left off in our series. We're going to continue where we left off in our series. I think we're coming to a stop in our reference point, going over the history of banking. Then we're going to get into this Claude Anderson Powernomics. Touch on some things here, but overall we definitely covered a lot of material in the series and gave some fundamental reference points, especially for those that are looking to how this information ties into understanding how to use the information going forward, and having a grounded fundamental base about banking, economics, history from a universal standpoint. Now, as I've been saying, do your fact checking. Don't believe me, go check it out. Do your fact checking. Because as we also say, don't believe me, you're gonna find out anyway. So of course, go do your fact checking, do your research, look more into the things that are being referenced here, because we're reading from a open cited source, which means many people get to put their perspectives into what is being said here on Wikipedia, which is a open-sided encyclopedia, a digital encyclopedia. And as I mentioned last week, those of the so-called enlightened ones, this is what they use. This was their thing, looking into encyclopedias, studying encyclopedias. This is how they became the erudites of their time, the learned men and women of their time. So now we're going to jump right into the 17th through the 19th century, and we're going to cover the time period of history here. So we definitely might have some in-depthness with the 17th century. It looks a little extended from what I'm overlooking here. But we have to understand this information from a fundamental standpoint is very important, because when you start to listen to people's perspective, you won't be so caught up in their view if it's more of information that is coming from a tunnel perspective. You would have more of a wider range of perspective once you kind of get into your research on your own and really look into information about the fundamental history of banking itself, how it came about. At least you will have some reference points of understanding, well, banking goes all the way back to ancient people, ancient indigenous people, and what their contributions were and how they participated. So we're going to jump into the 17th and 19th century, which is where the emergence of modern banking start to take off. And so we're going to get into the perspectives here, see what it has to say, see what our reference points are touching on, and let's do it. So starting out, states by the end of the 16th century and during the 17th, the traditional banking functions of accepting deposits, money lending, money changing, and transferring funds were combined with the issue of bank debt that served as a substitute for gold and silver coins. New banking practices promoted commercial and industrial growth by providing a safe and convenient means of payment and a money supply more responsive to commercial needs, as well as by discounting business debt. By the end of the 17th century, banking was also becoming important for the funding requirements of the combative European states. This would lead on to government regulations and the first central banks. The success of the new banking techniques and practices in Amsterdam and London helped spread the concepts and ideas elsewhere in Europe. So we see more of modernization of banking coming into effect in Europe. So this is when these concepts that have been learned from the Silk Road that we talked about last week, this is where these concepts are coming into to flourishing on a commercial standpoint, more of an industrial standpoint, and is being understood that the banking is what is going to drive industry, drive market activity, drive development of our society, of our communities. And this led into having the first central banks of what would be European central banks. And that's not to say as we've read previously and referenced previously, that's not to say that there wasn't central banks beforehand, but this is talking about more of the modern period. Okay, so this next portion is about the goldsmiths of London, and it states modern banking practices, modern banking practice, including fractional reserve banking and the issue of banknotes, emerged in the 17th century. At the time, wealthy merchants began to store their gold with the goldsmiths of London, who possessed private vaults and charged a fee for their service. In exchange for each deposit of precious metal, the goldsmiths issued receipts certifying the quantity and purity of the metal they held as a bailee. These receipts could not be assigned. Only the original depositor could collect the stored goods. Gradually, the goldsmiths began to lend the money out on behalf of the depositor, which led to the development of modern banking practices. Promissory notes, which revolved into banking notes, were issued for money deposited as a loan to the goldsmith. These practices created a new kind of money that was actually debt, that is goldsmith's debt, rather than silver or gold coin, a commodity that had been regulated and controlled by the monarchy. This development required the acceptance and trade of the goldsmiths, promissory notes, payable on demand. Acceptance in turn required a general belief that coin would be available, and a fractional reserve normally served this purpose. Acceptance also required that the holders of debt be able to legally enforce an unconditional right to payment. It required that notes as well as drafts be negotiable instruments. The concept of negotiability had emerged in fits and starts in Europe money markets, but it was well developed in the 17th century. Nevertheless, an act of parliament was required in the early 18th century, 1704, to overrule court decisions holding that the goldsmiths' notes, despite the customs of merchants, were not negotiable. So, as I mentioned before, they kind of prettied this up right here because there was definitely battles between fractional reserve structures, full reserve structures, and that battle, even though it's not mentioned in the references, but that battle definitely goes way back before the 17th century and before Europe so-called came up with the concept of fractionalized reserve banking. There was definitely issues about that going back thousands of years before prior. So what we're touching on is how the goldsmiths understood that they could pretty much use those receipts as payments and also lend out the debts that are owed to them or to their clients. They could lend that out to expand the credits that are owed. They can expand those credits, and now they have these investments of the deposits that they're using from their clients, from their customers, from their traders. They have those investments in place that are returning them larger returns. That way they can meet the demand of those that are making deposits with the goldsmiths. And they moved from doing that with gold and silver coin and started to do it with receipts, which became the IOUs and became the promissory notes eventually, and now what we consider and call banknotes. And so we've already read before that these banknotes will be considered that these promissory notes will be considered banknotes already, going back to the Silk Road and understanding the history with that, right? We've already established the fact that this is where this knowledge came from. So this next portion is called the modern bank, and it states in 1695, the Bank of England became one of the first banks to issue banknotes. The first being the short-lived banknotes issued by Stockholm's Banco in 1661. Initially, there were handwritten and issued on deposit or as a loan, and promised to pay the bearer the value of the note on demand in specie. By 1745, standardized printed notes ranging from 20 euros to 1,000 euros were being issued. I think that's pounds, not euros. 100 pounds to 20 pounds to 1,000 pounds were being issued fully printed notes that did not require the name of the payee in the cashier's signature first appeared in 1855. And those would be bearer notes. So this is your first appearance of cash, in a sense, your bearer notes in 1855 in Europe. Continuing, it says, in the 18th century, services offered by banks increased. Clearing facilities, security investments, checks, and overdraft protections were introduced. Checks had been used since the 1600s in England, and banks settled payments by direct courier to the issuing bank. Around 1770, they began meeting in a central location, and by the 1800s, a dedicated space was established, known as a banker's clearinghouse. The method used by the London clearinghouse involved each bank paying cash to an inspector and then being paid cash by the inspector at the end of the day. The first overdraft facility was set up in 1728 by the Royal Bank of Scotland. The number of banks increased during the Industrial Revolution and the growing international trade, especially in London. At the same time, new types of financial activities broadened the scope of banking. The merchant banking families dealt in everything from underwriting bonds to originating foreign loans. These new merchant banks facilitated trade growth, profiting from England's emerging dominance in seaborne shipping. Two immigrant families, Rothschild and Barry, established merchant banking firms in London in the late 18th century and came to dominate world banking in the next century. So, of course, y'all should be familiar with Barings Bank, which is a British merchant bank that's based in London and is one of England's oldest merchant banks, after the Berenberg Bank, which we touched on that last week. And their successor is Baring Asset Management. And then, of course, everyone should be familiar with the infamous Rothschild family, the Rothschild banking family of England, the English branch. And that's the English branch we're talking about here of the Rothschild family. It was founded in 1798 by Nathan Mayer Rothschild, who first settled in Manchester before he moved to London, England. At that time, it was a part of the Kingdom of Great Britain. And then you have the extension of the family, and they established N.M. Nathan Mayer Rothschild and Sons Bank in London. And history goes on from there pretty much. So I'll put that information in the chat so you all could get into that too as well. True peace, John. Do you want to say something? Or I can't.
Just the leading up, all this leads up to the framework of what's been operating globally based on the US dollar being that main reserve currency. and how the gold, like the USA has like most of the gold in the world compared to all these other countries. And then you have like the Washington D.C., the Vatican, and then the Bank of England. And I was going to kind of mention that's kind of make me think of like the Bank of England as being that third party to the Vatican and the DC connect, and how those operate, hasn't really been communicated, nor how those operate for being able to transition with technologies in respects to the indigenous hasn't really been like part of the focus of anybody's communications. It's just been people like, oh, this is what's been going on, but no one's really saying much about it. So I'm kind of glad we're getting to the foundations, the gold, you know, the goldsmiths being the originators of what currency, why it was founded, why monies and paper monies was founded, and then leading up to something in more depth here. True peace.
True peace. Yeah, we definitely covering the modern era, the emergence of modern era banking. And this is why last week and the week before last is very important, because that information is the precursor for what we're getting into today. And this is how the emergence came about. But as I've been mentioning it these past couple of weeks, they got this information from somewhere. And we hear, we seen it, we hear it, we're reading it, and what it states in the reference point, where this information came from. It came from the indigenous people, going all the way back to time and memorial, going way back. So we see how the emergence of certain supremacy systems and things like that came about. And so this is the foundation, and it gives us that if we just do our basic simple research. But now this is one key point I do want to iterate right here, because people get caught up on this particular point, and they throw it out, they throw it out there with the rest of their would be considered theories and things like that, or their hunches, and perspectives about this theory, that theory, and this power that may be, the powers that may be type of thing going on, and that powers that may be type of thing going on, which some might have valid points, right? But the information is not to get caught up solely in that, and you go down the rabbit hole and not understand the study behind understanding the history, not understanding the research purposes of getting into the history is not just to get caught up in the theories or the word, or the worries of the world. This is about having the knowledge, grounded foundation. Even if you just want to understand how to protect your own personal finance, these type of things are good to know, because you understand the history of finance, what people were doing in the past. Because a lot of people want to have that Bill Gates type of financial strategy, that Warren Buffett type of investment strategy, etc., right? But don't really look into the history, besides the theories that get thrown out there, the wild theories that get thrown out there. And like I said, some of them might be valid, but you don't really learn or extract the economic principles and skills, formulas, philosophies that actually work out of those theories. So getting into this information and understanding it from the perspective that we're talking about will help you actually more in the long run. That'll help you more in the long run. So let's get into where we left off. So continuing, it says two immigrant families, Rothschild and Baring, established merchant banking firms in London in the 18th century and came to dominate world banking in the next century. A great impetus to country banking came in 1797 when England threatened by war. The Bank of England suspended cash payments. A handful of Frenchmen landed in Pembrokeshire, causing a panic. Shortly after this incident, Parliament authorized the Bank of England and country bankers to issue notes of low denomination. So they had a little hiccup during the year 1797 with wars and things like that going on between the English and the French.
I was
And
part of the body.
Islam, go ahead.
That's interesting. You mentioned the French. You know, like the whole thing about the French is about love. And I was wanting to say this a moment ago, but I kind of held my tongue. But I feel like it's important because love, where attention goes, energy flows, and what is love really, and like you look at like some of the spats that happened in the Americas, where you had like the early settlers coming over looking for gold, and the peoples here they didn't really care much about it. They were more into the spirit, the vibe of the place, and that's like kind of looking at the whole picture of where we're heading into with the technologies and the digital influx of things. You got your digital currencies, and that's why this is really important, because it's really about the science of the future of not just America but the future of the world, without continuing into those spats. I don't look at love as a bank or as a something that you can um use as a currency like that. It's a little bit more. I don't think it's like something that's open and free either. I think it's a little bit more dynamic and obscure, and it's hard to kind of speak about, like what is love, and there's so many ways people will define that. So
Correct.
yeah, continuing on. Yeah, thank you, please.
I definitely feel you on that point, because what we're talking about is we're coming and what in the reference point from where we're speaking from, we're definitely talking about the Renaissance and the things that happened during the Renaissance period. This is from Lawiy going from the 15th to the 17th century. And then you got to remember what happened in the 1600s. A lot of major wars and infighting that happened over there in Europe and that part of Asia. It was definitely a lot of things going on. So you got to take into account those factors. And even if we take this all the way back to the 1100s, they're just coming out of the major influence by the Moorish, by the Moorish peoples and the Berbers and things like that kind of go into the influence of Europe and a lot of the stuff that you won't find information about and you won't find them really speaking in clarity about. And these things are kept away hidden in libraries and old books, and it's kept away from the public from understanding. But if you really do your research, you look into these old writers from the 1800s, from the 1700s that did their studies, look at who they reference in their studies, and that take you further even back to the 1500s, the 1100s, and you get into who was the philosopher or the scribes of that time and what their standpoint was, and what points of reference that they're speaking from, it all really ties in and makes sense because there's a lot of documentation from that time, and or just as you go back in general, there's information and there's writings and reference points going all the way back. So we definitely we definitely covering a lot of things that that don't get talked about, and from a standpoint that is rarely mentioned, because like I say, this is not to get people caught up in theories or anything like that, but definitely to understand the principles of economics and entrepreneurship, and really give insight on our contribution as indigenous peoples, as they're being referenced all the time, and how to understand and where that reference is being pointed out at. How to understand that reference and where it's being pointed out at. We're definitely covering that. So this next portion is called Chinese banking, and it states during the Qing dynasty, the private nationwide financial system in China was first developed by Shanxi merchants with the creation of so-called draft banks. The first draft bank, Rishingshan, was created around 1823 in Pinggao. Some large banks also had branches in Russia, Mongolia, and Japan to facilitate international trade. Throughout the 19th century, the central Shanxi region became the de facto financial center of Qing China. So y'all gotta excuse me if I'm pronouncing this a little off. I'm not sure if I'm on point with the pronunciation, but I'm definitely doing my best. And just to throw it out there, I do study these languages from Asia to Africa to China, and your old world biblical languages. I do study them and learn the language, each one that I can, especially those of the three main denominations of today, which is Christianity, Judaism, and Mohammedanism. So that would be Arabic, Hebrew, and your Latin. So I'm definitely getting my Spanish on, definitely getting my Hebrew on, and definitely getting my Arabic study on. So that way, when we're conveying this information, we're on point. So this next portion is called Japanese banking. Continuing on, it states in 1868, the Meiji government attempted to formulate a functioning banking system, which continued until sometime during 1881. They emulated French models. The imperial mint began using imported machines from Britain in the earlier years of the Meiji period. Masayoshi Masukata was a formative figure of later banking initiatives, of a later banking initiative. So the Japanese, they got their structure of modern banking by emulating what the French model of banking was. So this is essentially what I'm saying has been going on for time and time, going back to the ancient ones, because someone had to create these original structures. And since it's understood that the ancient Egyptians were doing this with their grain system, and that there were private banks, that there were temple-based banks, central banks, state banks, banks set up out of royalty. Instead of it being king and queen, it would be pharaoh, right? And uh, those structures are your pioneer structures that was set up, your pioneer models that was set up. So let's get into this next portion, which is development of central banking. And of course, as we've been saying, they're going to give this from a Eurocentric standpoint. So we have to keep that in mind. I'm gonna see if we can kind of get through. If we can get through the 17th through 19th century today, we can do our best. So it states the Tala de Canve de Barcelona, established in 1401, is the first example of municipal, mostly public banks, which pioneered central banking on a limited scale. It was soon emulated by the Bank of St. George in the Republic of Genoa, first established in 1407, and significantly later by the Banco de Gairo in the Republic of Venice, and by a network of institutions in Naples that later consolidated into Banco de Napoli. Notable municipal central banks were established in the early 17th century in leading northwestern European commercial centers, namely the Bank of Amsterdam in 1609 and the Hamburger Bank in 1619. These institutions offered a public infrastructure for cashless international payments. So, of course, as you hear, one of the banks was called Gyro, and that's one of the things that you guys should look into. I may go over it here before we close out this series, what gyro banking is. I think we have touched on it before, if I'm not mistaken, and gave an explanation of what gyro banking is. If I'm not mistaken, I think we did that during our economic series here. So we may have to revisit that and how they were able to offer a cashless international payment structure going all the way back to the 1600s. We're talking the 1600s. Hello. We're talking about the 1600s here, where they're talking about cashless international payments. So that means across nation waters, they was making cashless payments going on. And today we got this big craze about a cashless society, right? And you hear that term come back up today, but more in a way that has a very different type of emotional response than I would say what this conveys here, stating from the 1600s that they offer public for their public infrastructure for cashless international payments. This is the type of structure that they use. And this is why getting into reference points of history and of the past is very important, because a lot of the emotions that come with today's theories of the powers that be and how they are directing things, you would see where a lot of these concepts either originated from or why they was used, what causes them to be used or implemented. So you definitely have to really look into the past. And this is why it's important to do so. So continuing on, it says the first national, as opposed to municipal, central bank was the Swedish central bank, known since 1866 as Sveriges Riksbank, founded in Stockholm in 1664 from the remains of the failed Stockholm's Banco. A generation later, the establishment of the Bank of England was devised by Charles Montague, first Earl of Halifax, following a 1691 proposal by William Paterson. A royal charter was granted on 27 July 1694 through the passage of the Tonnage Act. The bank was given exclusive possession of the government's balances and was the only limited liability corporation allowed to issue banknotes. So the rest of the people were sanctioned, and they was given the monopoly on being allowed to issue banknotes. But that's not the case today here in America. Anybody could basically issue banknotes. So that is definitely that is definitely interesting. In the early 18th century, a major experiment in national central banking failed in France with John's Law Banque Royale in 1720 through 1721. A comparatively more successful attempt was the Bank of Spain, established by King Charles III in 1782. The Russian Assignation Bank, established in 1769 by Catherine the Great, was an outlier from the general pattern of early national central banks in that it was directly owned by the Imperial Russian government rather than private individual shareholders. In the nascent United States, Alexander Hamilton, as Secretary of the Treasury in the 1790s, set up the first bank of the United States, despite heavy opposition from Jeffersonian Republicans. So this goes back to what I mentioned, that there was a lot of pushback around establishing central banks. And today, the central bank we have in America is the Federal Reserve. And there was a lot of pushback between those that feel as if central banks and central bankers are pretty much not useful. In other words, they thought they was trying to rob the people. And then you had those that were for central banks, and most of them were central bankers themselves, or private bankers and central bankers themselves, that benefited from having the central bank structure. And today we have the Federal Reserve as a central bank, but but we have to understand it's its own independent entity. It's its own independent institution. It's still independent of the United States government, which is something major that we have to understand from reference point. And for a reference point, and if you look into the those that oppose the opposites, those that were the opposite of being for the central bank, you see that they may have shared the same points. So when it comes to looking into this, this I guess we can call it a battle. When it comes to looking into this political spat that happened between the Jeffersonians and those that were on Alexander Hamilton's side, when we get into it, you'll see the points that were made. You can see the points that were made from both ends, and why it's considered to be looked at as a bad thing for us to have central banks, and compare that to what we have today with the independent Federal Reserve structure and how it's set up today, and how people view the Federal Reserve, and how they look at the Federal Reserve, and what we have, and result of that. Some people think that our economy is screwed up. Some people think we are in the best times of our lives when it comes to our economic stability and status. So you want to be able to weigh these you want to be able to weigh these comparative points for yourself and really look into, you know, what is being said from both ends and why these points are being made. So continuing, it says central banks were established in many European countries during the 19th century. Napoleon created Banque, the Banque de France in 1800 in order to stabilize and develop the French economy and to improve the financing of his wars. The Bank of France remained the most important continental European central bank throughout the 19th century. The Bank of Finland was founded in 1812, soon after Finland had been taken over from Sweden by Russia to become a grand duchy. Simultaneously, a quasi-central banking role was played by a small group of powerful family-run banking networks, typified by the House of Rothschild, which with branches in major cities across Europe, as well as Hottinger in Switzerland and Offenheim in Germany. So here we go again with the House of Rothschild, the Rothschild family, right? So we know that the Rothschilds were Ashkenazi Jews, and they're considered a noble banking family from Frankfurt. You have Mayor Amschel Rothschild and the different factions of the family. And so as you can see, it's stating that the central banks was established during that 19th century. So from the 17th through the 19th century, this is where central banking really became a thing. And as we roll into the 19th century, you have your political spats about what happened here in Europe and wanting to carry that on, what happened in Europe and wanted to carry that on here in America. And you can see how that would end up being one of the major pushback points when America was separating from the the authority of the British Empire and England. So you definitely have some great points being referenced here and being brought to the light. But you also see why a lot of the crazy theories that come about, why they come up. And like I said, not all of them are crazy. Some of them are definitely valid things. And there's a book I mentioned called the Secret Temple. I mentioned before that you guys should check out. I may put a link to that in the chat here on Telegram. So those that are listening from YouTube, go ahead and join us here on Telegram and lock in on that. Or just you can research and look it up on your own and do your own research. But we'll definitely have the information in the chat, and you guys could join us here on Telegram. And I'll be eventually putting the link to our Telegram in the chat as well. So continuing, it states the 19th and early 20th centuries, central banks in most of Europe and Japan developed under the international gold standard. Free banking and currency boards were common at the time. A currency board is somewhat is somewhat similar to what you would call a monetary authority or a central bank. So this is also a pre-reference term to a central bank, which would be a currency board, like a board of administration. So it's saying free banking or currency boards were common at the time. Problems with collapses of banks during downturns, however, led to wider support for central banks in those nations, which did not as yet possess them. For an example, in Australia and the United States, the role of a central bank had been ended in the so-called bank war of the 1830s by President Andrew Jackson. So there was bank wars. So call it for what it's saying here. It was a bank war. In 1913, the U.S. created the Federal Reserve System through the passing of the Federal Reserve Act. So you have the bank war, which they state is a political struggle that developed over the issue of rechartering the second bank of the United States during the presidency of Andrew Jackson. It states the affair resulted in the shutdown of the bank and its replacement by state banks. And they even have some cartoon art we may have to share with y'all as well. So these spats were definitely just bigger than your regular old back and forth spat. This was banking wars. They was having banking wars as we had in the last 10 years when Bitcoin became more popularized. We definitely had a blockchain war, and that kind of in turn led into what some of us would describe as a small currency war. So continuing, it says, following World War I, the Economic and Financial Organization, the EFO, of the League of Nations, influenced by the ideals of Montagu Norman, and other leading policymakers and economists of the time, took an active role to promote the independence of central bank. A key component of the economic orthodoxy, the EFO fostered at the Brussels Conference in 1920. The EFO thus directed the creation of the Atra Hasis National Bank in Austria. I'm gonna definitely have to come back to that word, y'all. Or Atra Hasis National Bank. I'm gonna have to definitely come back to that one. And this is a national bank in Austria. Hungarian National Bank, Bank of Danzig, and Bank of Greece, as well as comprehensive reforms of the Bulgarian National Bank and Bank of Estonia. Similar ideas were emulated in other newly independent European countries. For example, the National Bank of Czechoslovakia. So we see here that prior to the United Nations, in the League of Nations, you had the influence of this Norman guy who they called the Lord Norman, the Right Honorable Lord Norman. He was an English banker. He influenced him and some other policymakers and economists. He influenced setting up independent central banks like you have with today the Federal Reserve. So this guy may be a influence to the structuring of the Federal Reserve, and more than likely he had to be, because the League of Nations also started here in America. So with everything we've covered just so far, we see the reason why us as Moorish people have to buckle down and really focus and get into being contributors to economic development. Now, some people who might not think that they're discriminating or being prejudiced or things like that, they might not take it that way, but it definitely comes off that way when people who have been classified as minorities, been put under oppression systematically based on their ethnicity, solely based on their ethnicity. And this is not to say that other people in other cultures have not been put in slavery, but when you look into the in-depthness, as we mentioned here before, when you look into the in-depthness, there's a systematic structuring just based on the ethnicity and skin pigmentation of a person versus someone of a different tribe enslaving another tribe and putting another tribe through slavery, right? Because they are a different tribe, not because they are a different skin pigmentation or ethnicity, and disenfranchising them, when it comes to economics. Now, a lot of the things that happened in the past in old slavery, as we mentioned here before, was really based on indentured servitude, and you had a mixture of your bondage and kidnapping and things like that. You had a mixture of those things, right? But this definitely was not based on the fact of you being another skin pigmentation and disenfranchising them, and things of that nature. So you had more of a tribalism perspective when it comes to slavery in the past. And as we read, numerous of times in the Holy Quran, Circle 7, the Prophet mentions all people have went through slavery for not honoring their forefathers and foremothers. So when you forget who you are as a people and people as a whole, when society starts to become more bastardized, and you have a society that's, or a civilization that's basically eating away at itself because they forgot those that came before them, and or they honored not the divine principles of nature, things like that, and went too far left, right? Or honored things outside of themselves or outside of nature or natural principles of nature, they would find themselves caught up in slavery. So you have the same thing here, right? But we have that taken even further now with the factor of ethnic oppression and genocide based on these things. So that entails become something that's bigger and more systematic, that really didn't just happen in one landmass or one area, as most tribalism things do. This became something that is systematic throughout not just one nation, but multiple nations. And this is why people get the concept of racism and prejudice really mixed up and not really understand the difference between the two. So continuing on where we left off, it says by 1935, the only significant independent nation that did not possess a central bank was Brazil, which subsequently developed a precursor thereto in 1945, and the present central bank of Brazil 20 years later. After gaining independence, numerous African and Asian countries also established central banks or monetary unions. The Reserve Bank of India, which had been established during British colonial rule as a private company, was nationalized in 1949, following India's independence. By the early 21st century, most of the world's countries had a national central bank set up as a public sector institution. albeit with widely varying degrees of independence. So this goes back to what I'm talking about. We have systematic structures of oppression. This is different. This is a different texture. So the things that came about later and why Moorish people are kept out of the contributions of economic input, economic structure and infrastructure. In some cases here in America was not allowed to read and many other different things, right? You have a different texture of what would be considered slavery. This is systematic here. Because networks, societies, and countries, this is not just one society enslaving a group of people based on their separate tribal culture. This has become an ethnicity thing that spread throughout the world. So now you have disenfranchisement of countries that have more of a population of one ethnicity than the other being disenfranchised, and domination of groups of countries dominating over other groups of countries that have more of the banking independence, the banking infrastructure, and or the banking power and popularity. So this and that takes us into this next portion, which is called Rothschilds. The Rothschilds have their own portion in this. Have their own portion in this. So it states the Rothschild family pioneered international finance in the early 19th century. The family provided loans to the Bank of England and purchased government bonds in the stock market. Their wealth has been estimated to possibly be the most in modern history. In 1804, Nathan Mayer Rothschild began to deal on the London Stock Exchange in financial instruments such as foreign bills and government securities. From 1809, Rothschild began to deal in gold bullion and developed this as a cornerstone of his business. From 1811 on, in negotiation with Commissary General John Charles Harries, he undertook to transfer money to pay Wellington's troops on campaign in Portugal and Spain against Napoleon, and later to make subsidy payments to British allies when he organized new troops after Napoleon's disastrous Russian campaign. His four brothers helped to coordinate activities across the continent, and the family developed a network of agents, shippers, and couriers to transport gold and information across Europe. This private intelligence service enabled Nathan to receive in London the news of Wellington's victory at the Battle of Waterloo a full day ahead of the government's official messengers. So we just heard that the Rothschild family had a private intelligence service under their corpus. Now, how many people would come to grips with something like that, or have mentioned that before? Because of course, we hear the stories about Rothschild. We hear it in a lot of people's theories that you may come across. Some people believe it. Some people just think is far fetched, and for the tinfoil folks, tinfoil hat folks, whatever their perspective might be, right? But as I've been saying, some of these things are clearly valid. Clearly valid. You have one banking family that positioned themselves to be a monopoly in the banking industry on a global scale. This is not something that's just small. This is something that was spreading across nations. They were buying bond investments in different countries, which means they were creditors of these different countries. They were secured creditors in these different countries with their investments. So they had ownership share of the country. So when it comes to private sector of dealing with things, they most definitely had some push and some pull. And like I say, we should all be aware of some of the stories, theories, and histories of these names of these families. And this particular family was definitely investing in not just one side of these different wars. And that brings us back to the last few paragraphs that we just read. They were funding their wars with these banks. There were wars being funded. There were banks being structured just to fund wars. In the early days of America, there were bonds issued. The first few bonds that were issued were based on funding wars that America was trying to participate in. This had nothing to do with funding food, clothing, and shelter of the people. Food, clothing, and shelter of the people. So they were fighting, and they were in a fight. They was on a mission, and we know what that mission was if we go into the Papa Bulls and things like that. This was about global dominance. Of course, we know that, or we should know that. There's too much reference points to the information out there. This is not just stuff that you get from Wikipedia, because Wikipedia, as much as people hate on it, a lot of the information that's being cited comes from research information. People that went and did their research, did their investigation, did their proper journalism, and brought the information forward. Now, it's not speaking about them in a derogatory manner, which is why you want to be careful with the information that you pick up sometime, especially here on Wikipedia, because a lot of information you could be getting could be derogatory. For example, information about the master teacher is definitely derogatory information. Don't even have his correct name. They have him under another name, which we know is not his name. That's his son's name, not his name. They have him listed as his son's name on it. So you definitely have to be on point. But if you didn't do your research, if you didn't get connected with the people that know both sides of the good and bad of this information, and you start to do your own deduction of your of your evidences and your findings on your own, then of course you'll get caught up like most people do. They get caught up in gossip, slander, and things like that. I'm in a conversation today amongst people of a certain belief, and they're saying everything that they think they know about another people of faith, and most of the things that they were saying is just based on beliefs and gossip and slander about that other faith. When we know all of the isms and sectism and things like that is what causes trouble for different cultures of different people, especially our indigenous people. So continuing on, it says the Rothschild family were instrumental in supporting railway systems across the world and in complex government financing for projects such as the Suez Canal. The family bought up a large portion of the property in Mayfair, London. Major businesses directly founded by Rothschild family capital include Alliance Assurance, now Royal Sun Alliance, Chemin de Fer du Nord in 1845, Rio Tinto Group in 1873, Société Le Nicole in 1880, now Ermet and Emmental in 1962, now Emery's. The Rothschilds financed the founding of De Beers, as well as Cecil Rhodes on his expeditions in Africa and the creation of the colony of Rhodesia. So they funded colonization. You do your research. According to the United Nations, today colonization is illegal. So they funded people that went and colonized African land and territory. Continuing, it says the Japanese government approached the London and Paris families for funding during the Russo-Japanese War, the war between Russia and Japan, between Russia and Japan. The London Consortium's issue of Japanese war bonds would total 11.5 million pounds at a 1907 currency rate. From 1919 to 2004, the Rothschilds Bank in London played a role as place of the gold fixing. And the London gold fixing or gold fix is the setting of the price of gold that takes place, which they call mark to market sometimes, that take place via a dedicated conference line. So basically a phone line, right? So this was previously held at the London premises of Nathan Mayer's Rothschild and Son Company, right? By the members of the London Gold Market Fixing Limited. And the benchmark was determined twice each business day for the London bullion market. So they were basically calling a lot of shots in positions in somewhat of a position of a monopoly, as some people would consider that. So this next portion is called Napoleonic Wars in Paris. Let's see how far we got. We may have to finish this next week. I'm gonna read this one last portion, and we're gonna stop it right there. We're gonna get into our reset and current events for this week, and we most definitely will be doing a reading of El's Holy Quran this week. So let's get this last portion here. Let's get this done, and then we're gonna close out. So it states Napoleon III had the goal of overtaking London to make Paris the premier financial center of the world. But the war in 1870 reduced the range of Parisian financial influence. Paris had emerged as an international center of finance in the mid-19th century, second only to London. It had a strong national bank and numerous aggressive private banks that financed projects all across Europe, and expanding the expanding French Empire. One key development was setting up one of the main branches of the Rothschild family. In 1812, James Mayer Rothschild arrived in Paris from Frankfurt and set up the Banque de Rothschild Forest. This bank funded Napoleon's return to Elba and became one of the leading banks in European finance. The Rothschild banking family of France funded France's major wars and colonial expansion. The Banque de France founded in 1796, helped resolve the financial crisis of 1848 and emerged as a powerful central bank. The Comptoir National des Comptes de Paris, also abbreviated as CNEP, was established during the financial crisis and the Republican Revolution of 1848. Its innovations included both private and public sources in funding large projects and the creation of a network of local offices to reach a much larger pool of depositors. So we're gonna stop right there. But as we see, they pretty much was everywhere in the emergence of modern, what is considered the emergence of modern banking, and you're coming into its dominance, its its global dominance, and we have to remember, like I mentioned previously, this ideal comes out of the Vatican. This ideal for global dominance comes out of the papal bulls for the Vatican for world domination and taking over indigenous peoples' land. So we definitely have to, keep that clear and understood. And this is not something that is a theory. This is something that is documented history. It has been apologized directly from the Pope Francis himself.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that was cool.
Right. So we most definitely we're gonna close with that. But we'll jump right back in next week, starting out with building societies. Well, we're gonna touch on some things that we have done ourselves, creating a building society, our Nucratic society, having our own building society. As far as finances go, have our own gyro type structure that we are working toward developing and building a community of people to get involved with. So you're best to get on your buckles now, and you don't wait till everything is said and done and fixed up, and you want to get in, but you don't just want to get in and be treated as a customer, as a retail person. You want to get the luxury of, I knew Dr. Lawiy, I knew them, but you wasn't with us shooting here in the gym while we doing all the building, the hard work. We moving on the divine timing. We moving on God's time. Nobody else's time. Nobody else's time.
I'd like, pardon the body.
Islam, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like as like all this is just like making me think of like the souls, like the cultivation of souls and sons. The spirit. What's the purpose of being alive, and the whole some of my thoughts that I've had in my deep introspections about what's going on in the world in this time period, and like why would a soul be born here, and I think that there's been some souls who have wanted to participate in the warfares, like if you get really deep about it, and then there's been some souls who have wanted to participate in the banking and the kind of the competition and the physical um layerings that involve like the what makes a soul tick, what gets your rocks off type thing. Yet at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, there's been a whole other group of people that have been based on an eternal life perspective. And then that gets into the whole thing about like the Enigma code and like World War II and like the conflicts. And there's been constant conflicts, and in those conflicts you get multiple pixels out of it. You get like things seem like they're breaking apart into all these different fragmented pieces. And then, much like a fractal, you start to see, oh, that actually was part of a bigger picture, and it expounds into a bigger picture. And so, like, that's kind of where, yeah, that's, getting closer to truth, and it's part of, I think, this discussion, and just wanted to share that.
Now, I definitely appreciate the point you're making, because it's definitely on point. It the only thing I could make good reference to is like some of these movies, like in some of these movies or TV shows, they kind of they show it in their own way, where they'll have like a clip of someone, either going through the timeline of history, and it's just all these different clips of either TV screens, or if it's just one screen, it's just this this flashing of different timelines of history, and going from this point to that point, and that's essentially what I take from what you described. And you really hit the nail on the coffin with that. And that's what we're doing. We're peeling back the layer, we're peeling back the onions, right? We're peeling back the layers of the onion, and we're going in depth. We're going by the micro size portion of each step of history, and really walking through it. And like I've been saying, there's more details that we can get into, but we don't have enough time for that in one sermon. We don't have enough time for that in one Cooper. So we definitely taking that time. We time traveling, and like I said, peeling back the onion and doing the research, getting into the factual actuals that we know we can verify and validate. And as you said, it just brings you further, further in depth with the truth. And you know, as I mentioned, some people might not see it that way. Some people might see it another way, and that's totally fine. Like I said, there's some that might be on the opposing side of some of these matters, and some that might be on the pro side. You're gonna have your pros and cons from each different fragment and step of things that we go on. But as people say a lot, or as the saying goes, you want to make sure you're on the right side of history when all is said and done.
Right.
And so there's a lot to unpack, even with just that. With that, because even with what we're doing here in the Moorish Temple of America, a lot of our people do not understand the ancient and the point of the ancient and divine creed. And even having a understanding of Orthodox Islamic history, right, and really knowing how it actually came about, and understanding those factors of things, because you get into these big spats about who God are we worshiping, and this, that, and third. And as I said, I was I was in this space, I was in this conference today, and a lot of that came up, especially about having relations with people from different faiths. And it was just funny to hear the answers, because we're talking about people who are broken up into different sects, especially of one faith already, that's broken up into different fragments, a bunch of different fragments, right? And so who's to say that the person you might love and might be your person won't come from a different faith, when clearly the scripture says, for God's righteousness will be found from faith to faith. Some people interpret that however they want to interpret that, especially from a tunnel vision type of way. But I see that as somebody who deals with inner faith, understanding that, well, that could also mean from this faith and this discipline to this discipline, you're going to learn God's righteousness. right? And so, especially if God is the God of all and all in all, there's no monopoly on which particular culture of people is God's children, or who looked at God, who gets looked at by God as a people. And that'd be the funny thing about dogma and really trying to understand people from their dogmatic principles. Because who's to say that your person might not come from another faith, another walk of life? And clearly in the scriptures, it says God is the God of all in all, right? And from faith to faith, you find God's righteousness. And I think it mentions it again also in the book of Corinthians, where it talks about understanding different languages. So, that is more of a dogmatic thing. And, you know, we're gonna have that. Of course you're gonna have that. You're gonna have your pros, your people that are on the pro this and con that against that. You're gonna have that. But as I just said, you want to be on the right side of truth. We don't want to be caught up in dogmatism. And some people think dogmatism is the truth. They really think, Jesus flies on Pegasus across the sky and things like that. So whatever floats your boat, right? And you're gonna have those things. You have a lot of people miss that principle that just because this person is uh uh with the Buddhist philosophy, that means he doesn't, he worship Buddha and this that and the third, when actuality Buddha is just a short way of saying the divine creator. Same reference point that you would have as saying God or Theos as the divine creator.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your Alat and your Manat and these other Islamic deities that we talked about here before, as well as your Elohims, or it could even be those that are considered disagreeable. Your Molechs, your Marichis, right, from Hebrew. But we know by way of looking at not just the dogma, but if you get into the real science of these things, the languages, the ultimate truth, right, is what we're getting at, is that all of these deities, you're agreeable and disagreeable. Though we know that the disagreeable, majority of them, are not in the image and after the likeness of divine nature and God himself, right? Because I don't think nature is okay with you just, you know, jumping into a pit full of fire and now you can't enjoy nature. You can't enjoy the divine breath no more. So eating away at yourself don't really make sense, right? Or self-sacrificing yourself to the point to where you're decapitating and decomposing yourself. Now those type of things don't make sense, right? We get that. There is definitely no benefit in that, especially if it's not based on something honorable or what we consider noble. You're not doing it to save your family. You're not doing it to save your community. Things like that, right? But essentially, what I'm getting at is, we know that what they call the Elohim, or God, the gods, or God, is still going back to El Kalum, El Kul, the all and all, the divine. And so there's a principle for that in Buddhism. There's a principle for that in Hinduism, even though they have like 1,001 deities. Hinduism, as we know, is just a perversion, or will be considered a perversion of the ancient Egyptian culture. Even Christianity to this day comes out of the Zoroastrian way of life out of ancient Egypt. So being anointed and things like that, now that's nothing new. But the dogmas and what people get into, these are the things that divide people. And so going through the scale of time, going through the scale of history, this is how we bring things together, bring things into the light, help one another.
Yeah,
And
for the technologies. I mean, like the languages, spells, like
right,
AI is gonna like potentially become a god to people, you know, the binaries, you know, and the hexadecimals and the wordings and the codings that, you know, we've created all these devices, you know, and eventually it's dangerous for people to become dogmatic, you know, with that being the future. You know, you take one dogma to another dogma and you make, you know, the AI system your guide, you got a whole nother set of issues and you never really solved what the heart of the matter is, you know. There's a whole bunch of meat and potatoes that need to be eaten by everyone and
look,
enjoyed, you know, not in that lake of fire, you know, fraternity type thing. Which, you know,
right,
people might misunderstand what I'm saying there based on dogmas, and that's the point.
right. Islam. Look, let me do a quick reset, and then we're gonna get into this because we're gonna open up after this reset with our current events. So I definitely want to talk about that because that is something that is current. So true peace, Islam, Hotep, Namaste, all the good stuff. Welcome to Branch Temple number 24 of the Moorish Science Temple of America. We are a global branch temple of the Moorish Science Temple of America, where we teach our people their nationality and their divine creed. Come link yourself with the family of nations by joining us here every Friday on Telegram, every Friday and Sunday. Please, if you want to join us on Sunday, please make sure that you tap in with us in the chat and let us know. That way I know it's people that are that are present and want to open up for Sunday. But we're here every Friday and available every Sunday for newcomers gathering, especially if you want to bring people in to learn and have them gather and get a real proper fundamental and proper perspective of what we teach in Moorish science in the Moorish Science Temple of America. Now, some people might not agree with everything that we consider fundamental, but eventually, if you see that we're speaking from a 2 plus 2 equals 4 perspective, you'll get it and be able to put these things together for yourself. We're not speaking from tunnel vision and rhetoric. And that's one of the things that hold us back as a people, like we're talking about now, these dogmatic principles that can get us caught into falsehood. So we understand things are strangely mixed with truth and falsehood, as the Prophet Noble Drew Ali mentions. And so we try to give you all the best way to look at these things, not just from one person's opinion, but most definitely from a educated standpoint. The Prophet told us to go get a good European education because that will help us understand not just you know not just somebody else's psychology, things like that, but actually how to look at things for the way they are, because that good European education came from good Moorish education. Islam, true peace, Hotep. So with that, we're gonna jump into our current events for this week, and we're gonna really wake it up. So the floor is open, and I do want to get right back into what we were saying, because you have this whole dogmatic thing, and like today, I'm in the space I was mentioning earlier, and of course, it was a Christian room, will be considered a Christian room, and they you know labeling people, oh, he a Hebrew Israelite, oh, he with the whole Tepism. I'm like, Hotep is the whole. You wouldn't even have Christianity if it wasn't for Hotep. Like, it's like, what are you talking about here? Like, why do we label our people this way? Because they want to kick knowledge. But everybody from every walk of life and faith does pillow talking, or like like we say in the Afro community, right? You want to kick knowledge, you want to kick some science. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. And especially now with what's going on, you have the back and forth between the gender war and all of that that's going on. And we talked about that plenty of times here. But I do want to acknowledge the point and bring it back to the point Brother Jonathan was mentioning, especially what we have today with AI technology and on TV shows like the 100, Westworld, all these different other TV shows that really show different ideologies of how to use AI technology or advanced technology or quantum mechanical technology type things. And with the dogmatism that we have today, and especially with some dogmas morphosizing into other, more crazier and wilder dogmatic principles, we're looking at some dangerous slopes here. So, true please, the floor is open. Not sure who all in the room with us. I know Brother Jonathan is here with us, but happy holiday to everyone. Islam, Islam, Islam.
Yeah, I think expounding on that, like we mentioned the word God a lot. Like, and for me, like I've done a little bit of research in the etymology of words, and the word God, I think stemmed from a Germanic deity, God. And then if you look at things, left brain, right brained, there's this notion that, God with two T's, it has like a sense of pi. This is just like some of my own theoretical musings. But like go pi, it's like go the infinite circle, and that infinite circle is gonna go. Or you can look at the word as good, and in that, there's two O's versus just one, and where two or more come together within the name of the Most High, you start to get tunings, and in those tunings there's truth to be found. But I'm not gonna say that, your good is gonna be better than my good type thing. And like for me personally, sharing a little bit about my story, I had mentioned about how maybe there's been souls that have come here for warfare. I know that there's been experiences that I've came here for, and I've been a little bit extreme. Like I wasn't one of those students that was a 4.0 GPA. I was one of those 2.2 because it was more extreme to be on that edge. That's where I was getting that emotion from. And that could even go back to my situation being born, and things that have happened since then. Like, do we choose to be born and be born a certain way, or are we just catalysts of the environment type thing? And that also gets into like the do you believe the universe is a friendly place or not? And in your choice, and the choice is so important, and the wordings too. There's letterings going on, and there's vibrational tunings involving those letterings. And so the American English language is a challenge, and the roots of all these languages, has its place. And in that, that's why I'm here to ideally curve, because things are going to curve one way or another, like you just said. We're on a slippery slope, and the idea is to get that firm foundation based in truth. And yeah, tributes.
Islam. I think you really woke something up with that. As we say, we wake it up. You're waking it up with that, because if we say who, okay, as not as we say, but as we hear, especially from people of the Christian faith, say, well, your God is not my God. I even hear some more members of the Moorish Ensemble of America say, well, my God is Allah. And I've did sermons about this before, to where how you not realize that we're talking about the same deity. We're talking about the same God. When you say Elohim, Elohi, this is where the Semitic word Allahi comes from in a masculine form. This is where this word comes from. And when you bring Allah into the picture, which is the feminine form of 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 this term, even Allah, Allah is still coming out of the histories of Hebraic knowledge, right? So you end up with saying, well, my God is a different God than your God. Like I was saying earlier, you, the Buddhist person, you worship Buddha, and I worship God. But who and what deity are you referring to when you say God? Because as you just mentioned, the word God itself has Germanic roots, which where you get the word gut, right? It
Right.
comes from the Germanic word gut. And it could also be symbolic of good, right? Because that is a thing that's a part of the epistemology, not etymology, but the epistemology, which was a social reference to the word gut or God. God is good. That's why people say today in English or in Latin, God is good. God is good all the time, right? Or and Arabic is Allahu Akbar. God is the greatest, right? So you have that reference point to that. But if we hear the dogma of, well, I worship a different God, and my God is, my God is a good God, and my God ain't called no Allah and this, that, and third. So you are an African American or a Euro American, whatever it may be, and you have a Judeo Christian or Judaic religious structure going back to Abraham, who was a Hebraic person. He wasn't German. He was a Hebraic person who came out of Chaldea. He was Chaldaic. So that means he did not speak German or Germanic guttural language. You talking about somebody who spoke a whole different type of language, right? So how would your God be called God? Wouldn't he have, or he had, or the source, or it have a different name, right? Or different reference point? Then you have those that would say, well, my God is Jehovah, Jehovah, right? And so we get to that point of, well, anybody could have been a Jehovah, anybody could have been considered a Yahweh. I've mentioned plenty of times in our sermons and Coopers that Moses was called a Jehovah by who you say is Jehovah or Elohim in the Bible. So when you use use this divide and conquer tactic that comes based off of a dogmatic reason, and you want to feel separate and unique and play into favoritism, because that's basically what what is going on when you're using elitism in the wrong fashion. There's no, you know, you have in the scriptures in the Bible, it says faith without work is dead. And you have those that really have not put no faith, no work into their faith and what they call their faith or their discipline. Because faith is basically steadfastness, right? If you know, really look into the scriptures of what the Bible is saying, faith is basically steadfastness. So that means you're doing something, you know, you're doing something, uh, you know, routinely. Your duty, you're fulfilling your duties routinely, faithfully.
I like what you mentioned about a lot being the feminine form, and like for me, the word T, has masculine almost vibration to it, and when you said a lot is the feminine form, I was like, whoa, that like just like brought into the truth about the need for the feminine presence to have its balanced rulership here, and things have been distorted when it comes to the importance of the childbearers, the wombs, and it makes sense that would be that cross, to be the ones who are the perpetrators of the next generations and the next generations, the ones who carry that divine nature spark within them in the ability to replenish life and to continue life. Yeah, it's just really, really, really cool.
Islam. And like the thing is, what most average people don't know, especially even in Islam. Like, like I said, a lot of Islamic brothers and sisters, especially Moorish brothers and sisters, they don't know that Alat was the name that was being used by the Quraysh tribe before Allah came around. And the Islamic period started to kick off. It didn't happen until after Muhammad. So a lot of the things that were going on that's documented in history that was going on, it was some rough living. It was definitely some rough living. But even after, this is the thing, things actually got even worse after Muhammad, right? A lot of things got worse after Muhammad, even though the structure of how they operated their society was more of a matriarchal thing. Things actually got worse during the patriarchal period. And so you have the misunderstanding of these Teflon, which would be your ancestral spirits or your ancestral deities, right? So people be a fool to say, or it'll be a strong level of naiveness to say and think that, well, hey, my grandma, my great grandma, I don't have a connection with them, and they're not in me, and this, that, and the third. But you still have a picture of them, right? And so you're talking about a day and time where pictures were not taken. There were statues that were created, right? That was left to depict that person, and that statue is what you will refer to as, my great grandma. Same way you would do a picture. Hey, that's great granny. That's great 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 grandma right there. That's my great 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 auntie. You get what I'm saying? And so that turns into what they call paganism and deity worship, over time. And
The idol worship, the impressionisms and that gets back to the beginning, about the angels, winged angels and winged devils, and talking about how these visionaries could have been looking into the future and seeing the mass amount of people playing these video games, looking at what we call an angel and saying that's an angel, and so the tunings are almost like a portal through time, like a wormhole. That's how I was trying to relate it to, and that's dangerous because it's not necessarily the truth. Just like the idol worships aren't necessarily the truth, or the dogmatisms aren't necessarily the truth that people get caught up into. you know, everything in moderation. That's what I was taught. You know, there's a level of moderation and finding balances with things. But you know, yeah.
No, and you're definitely on point. And it brings me back to the point I was making. Also, was about us, especially as Moorish people, us as people of the book, and things like that. But really, with our divine and national movement, is a lot of them don't really know actual educated theology. They don't know these type of things that people get into from the basis of theology. So this is why I say, coming from an interfaith standpoint, we seem to look at things with more of a wider academic scope and with an academic premises versus just some type of summarized understanding theology. Because if you're going to be a minister and a person who teaches our people, what would be considered the hermeneutics, right? These are the interpretations from a erudite, a mutalib in Arabic, a learned man and woman who went and did the study, and they're breaking these. They're supposed to be meant to break these things down. They're supposed to be the one who explain these things. So and this is where things get funny, because, and especially in today's Christianity, right, you have it to where you're not supposed to participate in divination, like we talked about previously, in previous sermons. But you have people like Moses, you have people like Daniel who interpreted dreams, Joseph who did these things, but it was okay for them to do it, right? But it's not okay for someone, right? It's not okay for someone else in modern day time. You're talking about following a man that was turning water into wine. Am I not mistaken?
I mean,
Am I off?
that's a whole other level of comprehension. You know, I mean, there's certain things that there's the mythos, and then there's the facts, and then there's the truth. You know, I'm not here to say that man isn't a creator of energy. Never occurred to our reason that we are. Yet at the same time, there's that level of moderation, and going back to like me talking about my story and that 2.2 GPA, like I wasn't really into the whole GPA. I was into the scraping by and living on the edge type thing. And so like people come here for different reasons, and it would be egotistical of me to say, oh, my reason's the right and only way to live life. You got to live on the edge. That's not right for people who would like to build better, ideally in a way that curves not on a slippery slope, but curves in a path towards that divine truth and that divine love, and a lot of that is present in the mothers and fathers of our world, and that's, I think, the best place to look for curving in a strong foundational light. True peace.
True, and that's essentially where we're getting at with this, because and it still all goes back to the point you're making about the AI thing, especially with today, when AI is determining what we should eat, what we should wear, what we should say to people, what we can't say to people. AI is being used to red flag our conversations. Oh, you can't talk about that. Oh, we can't monetize that. Oh, we can't, advertise that. And we're getting into even more dogmas today, to where, like Candace Owens, I recently saw one of her shorts. She was saying that, hey, we need to call a spade for things for what it is. And she was talking, I can't remember, it was one of the big podcasters, and she was saying, well, I'm a girl, right? You're not going to look at me and call me something else. When you look at me and, you see me based on natural biological gender, I'm a girl and you are a guy, right? And so these type of things with these, type of dogmas are going on, and that, mutating into something else. We're looking at a crazy, a crazy situation, and a slope that we can see that are coming for people that may fall in, may fall into the traps detrimentally of, treating AI as king, as God, and living their life based on solely that, to what we already have went through, as a people. Because solely this is just about getting to that divine and getting on that divine path as a people, as humanity, as we move forward. Because, like you said earlier, love is not really a transactional thing. It's more of a transformative thing, right? And we're trying to transform into being, the best that we can be as individuals, as people, as humanity, right? What you said,
Like that.
Islam, go ahead.
What you said there, that was great. It's not a transactional thing, it's a transformative thing. That's it. I needed to hear that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and these are principles that come from, I'm just speaking things that I know that come from the transcendental, you know, uh, walks of life, or premises. And so, these are our goals. And like I say, it's a crazy slope that we're looking at for people, because of these type things. And the whole dogma thing, it really hurts us more than it helps us. So for me to hear today, well, hey, you shouldn't, you shouldn't advise that person to marry that person that comes from another faith because of the clashing and this, that, and the third. Versus, well, there is a vine and fig tree that connects all people, right, to the divine, and you have to find that middle path. Each different philosophy, faith, and or political structure, they have a middle path that meets one another in the middle. And so you have to be able to find that. No one should be able to be dictating, based off your faith, well, you shouldn't this person because this is what we supposed to believe. And I posed the question. I was like, well, if you're not supposed to marry a person from another faith, what about the different sectisms? Is one sect only supposed to marry one sect of people? Then that really cuts the dating pool and dating opportunities that you have short. Because if Lutherans only supposed to date Lutherans, and Mormons only supposed to date Mormons, right? What does that look like when we're talking about a melting pot of society, and we know people from different paths and different backgrounds and different walks of life, they find connections with one another, right? And this is why, I not this is why I kind of touch on the racist thing, or the racism thing, and really touch on them points. Because understanding prejudice that we create for ourselves, and how that comes about, especially with things like this, because out of dogma comes your prejudices. Out of dogma comes a lot of prejudice. Out of dogma comes a lot of racist things, right? And this is how we're able to really clear up these matters. We do it from educated standpoint. And so when I hear people from different walks of life, and these things are solely based on religious beliefs their religious beliefs. And a lot of the preachers and teachers that you have, they really do not get a good foundational education. Most of their education on their religious beliefs comes from a religious bias, right? This is why I said more our perspective theologically is more of a interfaith based, so you get more of a broader scope on how different philosophies and principles of the world connect. We're able to see how this one principle over here from this faith is the same thing over here in this other faith, right? And so those that are blocked off by these dogmas or these religious biases, they can't really see those things. They don't really get a chance to see those things. And so this is, what we have today, going into like you said, the AI and the technology that's coming about with these things. Because you have the dating apps. Like I said, AI is determining what you should wear, who you should date, what you can and can't say, right? That is marketable or not. This is the future that we're walking into, and I think that is a current event that we're dealing with. Even though it touches into something that should be a sermon, but this is definitely a current event. And currently, like I mentioned with Candace Owens, you got people that are currently talking about this. This is today's news, today's conversation. Islam.
True peace. Helping brothers and sisters to align with discernment, I think, is a huge goal, for this project moving forwards. Because yeah, that's exactly what's starting to spark. Where you have some of the older generations who spent a lot of their time of service participating with one sect or another, trying to learn those bodies of knowledge. We're coming into an age where the next generations are whether it's either fear or frustrations or just feeling, neglected because so much attention was given to, certain practices. You get like a backlash, or like an opposite kind of move where it's like, well, I'll just start following the computers, and that's not necessarily, the computer's way of organizing things, and that's not necessarily the right alignment. Looking at, in the middle way, you will go most safely, or that, everything based on living a life of temperance and moderation. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to participate with the developments that we've created to make life, better and easier. And we have a bird's eye view to see that there's a lot of land, and there's ways to cultivate the lands that could be beneficial for a lot of people. And you can, I think what Elon Musk was talking about, there's more of a danger of population collapse, or depopulation, because of these types of relationships aren't being met. People talking about android sex and things like that. It's like,
Wow.
yeah, you got the robots coming into play, and it's like, there has to be some sensibilities where the masculine and feminine energies are able to be balanced based on that brotherly, sisterly, temperance, and I think that's based on knowledge. I'm big about knowledge is my love language. I like to share knowledge for right reason, and communicate for right reason. And it's been difficult because I felt, many ways disconnected, and that's why I show up here. And I know at the intro, talking about how the intro talks about how, not wanting to marry into the the European kind of races. And I look at that not as a negative thing. I look at that as a curve, because if you've already had, the progressions, whether you look at the white race as being that fire that's been burning from the, east to west, there's also different views on what east to west is. I think I was watching a video about how the Moors, I think that's inverted, isn't it? They're like your north is south, and your south is north, and your east is west, and your west is east.
Uh-huh.
Based on the old text. I don't know. That was just like a video that someone had pulled up from, like, I guess the St. Louis based library, or not library, but something. He was showing a video. He was in some type of museum or something, and he was showcasing some of that information. I was like, that's cool. That makes sense. Like, there was either projects, that have happened before in this area. I know that the Moors were here, and I think that's a whole other discussion, as we continue on with the banking. But yeah, it gets really deep, and it's really cool.
No, but I get what you're saying. I mean, because the thing is, what we're talking about is integration from from a standpoint of being put in bondage and kidnapped, right? And so when that happens, you're forced, like we're talking about now, you're forced into a certain dogma. You're forced into a certain faith or religion, and so that that ended up happening. And that's what's mentioned. We're given, like it says in the Holy Quran, Circle 7, we're giving the church and Christianity back to the European nations. So, or back to the Europeans, and we're taking up Islam, which is our, for our divine salvation, right? And divine and earthly salvation. Because like what we're going into just even now about the different things that, certain adepts and members of the temple don't really get now, even to this day, is that, our Islamic principles is not the what they call Orthodox Islam. This is based off the ancient and divine principle, going all the way back to Imhotep, which is totally different. We're not considering ourselves to be Muslims or Muslims because of what people consider to be the Orthodox Islam. This is based off of the true meaning of what it means, especially according to the scriptures. And as it say in the Bible, blessed be the peacemakers. So that would be us peacemakers, Muslims, ones of peace. We are those that are ones of peace. And Islam itself just means submission to God, submission to to Elohim, submission to Allah, to the source, which would be your Elohim. So this is different than how they look at it as Sunni Muslims, uh, your Shiite or your Muhammad, your your Mahdiism, and all these other different. So that Islam. What you saying? No, what you saying? I couldn't hear you because.
Is the Muhammad is the Sufi, that was like the more intense sect of the three, right? The Sunni were the whirling dervishes. They were more like the mediators, spinning between the yin to the yang, so to speak, between the Sufi and the Shiites, right? Or maybe it was the Shiites. I might get that a little bit twisted, but yeah.
Matter of fact, I'm gonna make sure we got the right word. Let's make sure. No, not Mandism. Yeah, it's Mahdiism. So you got your Mahdiya, your Shiites, and your Sunni. I was saying Mahdi. I mean, but there you got those two, those that follow the Mahdi, right? But same thing in Christianity. You got your Lutherans, your different sects. So this is what ended up happening with with that bondage and kidnapping, because you're forced into following someone else's culture and religion. So when we talking about Islam, we're not talking about those sects or how they see it, or even you got Hanifism, right, which is just following the wise men's teaching of Islam, which is actually kind of where where we base our style of teaching from, because the Hanif in Islam is Essenes from Hebrew, and Jesus was of the ancient mystic order of Melchizedek, and that's in the book of Hebrews, right? And a lot of people don't really read that from the Christian faith, or don't really understand that standpoint, and so you get a lot of confusion. So this is why we say we're giving Christianity back to the Europeans, and then there was a great portion of time when the Bible and the scriptures were being taught to slaves differently than how it's actually written. So they
Right.
don't even have, and that culture and those mannerisms and behaviorisms is passed down into what we see the modern, church today have, especially the black church have today. You know, they don't really understand the broader aspects of theosophy or theology and those points. You know what I'm saying? So
It's
you don't
taken
have a lot of
a lot of
people getting to the knowledge. What you saying, Islam?
it's taken a lot of discernment, going through different texts. I'm not saying I'm a scholar on those high levels, like some of these people going in one direction or another within, the Protestant or the Lutheran or all that. But being able to discern from a multitude of texts has been kind of, where I've looked at it, being having access to technologies at a young age, and the, Netscape Navigator, and these Yahoo web searches, before SEO and the monetization of things started kicking in and making a mess of things. And that's not for, I don't think that's for this, tonight communicating, but discernment, I think, is really important, because there is a lot of text that people are still arguing over. And that's a dogma in and of itself, is being an atheist arguing over these words that were written, that it's like, well, I read those too, and I was able to discern, oh, well, that came from this time period because of this type of control, mechanism. But that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's reasons
Right.
why these truths have, there's truths there. You just have to know that, it's in God's time, not mine or yours. It's God's time, that infinite. You can look at that as an infinite circle, which a circle isn't really ever a circle, because of the way that pi works. It's constantly moving, and there's different number equations going off in there all the time. So
Yeah, golden ratio and spherical. Yeah,
right, right.
that's right. It's a spherical, spiritual. I'm with you. So
True P.
with that, I'm glad you mentioned it. I do want to mention, uh, we are, we are taking off on our channel. As we mentioned over the weeks, we are monetized. And I also mentioned, what we're holding out for on the website, working on getting that back up. We're gonna make sure we open up this season that we're going through the right way. We're gonna be doing things with the right people, and as I've mentioned here plenty of times, I appreciate the fact that we are starting out small. And the right people will gravitate towards what we're doing, and as we continue to build a brand, you're gonna have many people start to gravitate toward us that really resonate with the message of what we're saying and really listening, and especially with us continuing the elders that came before us and their works, and doing it in a you know uh, uh, a progressive manner, with the blueprint that's been laid out, and continuing forward with it. We're not here to change the doctrine as has that has came that came about. We're not here to change the doctrine that our elders brought to us. We're here to bring it to where it's this perfect blend, and where you have a family roundtable of different schools of thought and perspectives and how they connect with one another and to each other. As we know, a lot of different schools of thought that came out during the 19th century extends out of the Moorish Science Temple of America. The teachings of the Moorish Science Temple of America comes out of the mystic teachings of sages and wise men from ancient Egypt. This is where the prophet went to get ordained on his mission, and he brought that mission to us here in America to continue forward. And this is to understand what the ancient shrine is, the ancient temple is, and protect the shrine of the temple. And that's all the prophet brought to us. And those ancient teachings that go all the way back to the Essenes, to the Al-Hanif, the order of Melchizedek, of Maliki Sadat, so, or Archangel Michael. So you have that spiritual ancient connection that we're bringing forth today to connect people. You get access to more of a broader scope of that wisdom and knowledge. And as more people come on, the initial goals that we have, we can continue on. The master teacher had people from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds that supported what the master teacher was teaching, and bringing us together as a family, as the people of the book, from all different parts of the world, because he showed us that we are connected to the divine, to the oneness, the singularity of divine nature. Whether you want to call him God, the source, Allah, El Kalum, all in all, etc., however you want to refer to the source, that uh, you know that's pretty much what we're bringing forth here. And so essentially we want to make sure that the people that come forward understand that we're slow boogieing, not too slow, but we definitely taking our time and doing things tactful, and make sure we're doing things on God's time, not trying to rush the things that we're doing. We have a lot of things going, especially with having financial structures in place and economic things that we're doing, developing our own school structure, well, actually system. Like if you're in a Texas-based school system, you have your HSID and your other different school districts that are structured, and you have a bunch of different schools that are a part of that district. And I'm pretty sure it's the same way in other states, but just the example of a reference of what we're doing and what our end goals is. The prophet said, and others that came after the prophet, even some before the prophet, mentioned how we are a communal people and we need to be developing our own communities and townships. So that's one of our goals as well. So there's a lot of things that we're getting into, providing jobs for our people. These are our goals. But like I said, we're starting slow, and we're progressing toward that direction of things. And make sure our people have upright principles to go by, so they have the ability to make sound decisions, especially with the things that we've discussed, with the things that we discussed here today that are coming up when it comes to AI, society, our education, our nutrition, and a lot of things that come into to effect with that. So with that, we're gonna jump into our weekly reading of El's Holy Quran, because we come in short here on time. So I want to get through chapter 40 efficiently as possible, succinctly as possible, and get to our holy instructions and close it out here tonight. But we definitely had a good build and got some great points out tonight. And Keep your eyes on the political race. Of course, there's a lot of, things going on. Same things pretty much are going on. You want to keep your eyes open for that. Things that are happening in politics, things that are happening in the legal system, laws are being changed. You want to update yourself with that. We haven't really came across anything too major, and just keep on with the keep on, because we definitely are. We here every week, every Friday and Sunday. We are available for those that want to come online and open up with us and chat and participate in our newcomers gathering, especially if you're a newcomer and you're new to our structure, you're new to the Moorish Science Temple of America, you want to understand more about the fundamental principles of the Moorish Science Temple of America. We're not here to push the rhetoric. We're not here to push you into having to speak a certain way. Definitely have to live a certain way. As they say in the church, come as you are, and come get involved. Like the prophet say, a lot of our good brothers and sisters are still in the church, and if we as teachers of Moorish science, and now this is for those that are already members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, if we present ourselves in a better manner, especially as if we know what we're talking about from a theological standpoint, from an educational standpoint, from an academic standpoint, this is what's going to stick out to our people, and we reach them where they're at. There's a lot of technology that we have, and we need to put to use. And this goes beyond doing the YouTube videos and things like that, beyond the patrons and stuff like that. This definitely goes beyond it. This is things that we can do on an industrial level, right? That creates economy, and not just sit on podcasts talking about it and what needs to be done or what the individual person can do. We're making the steps to where we have community. We have a community, and we have a society based on that specifically, especially a society based on sound wisdom, and those that want to walk down that path and get in tune with that path understand what Moorish science is about. Can we kick knowledge? Yes, you can. Can you kick the knowledge? Let's see. Many called, few are chosen. So with that, we're going to jump into our weekly reading of El's Holy Quran. We're going to start off with chapter 40, revealed in 619 AD, and it's called Al-Jinn, the hidden ones, disagreeable, malevolent beings. And its original order in the Quran was chapter 40, and the mistranslation, they moved it to chapter 47. So as y'all know, we begin our prayers and thinking by using the name of the source, Allah Rahman, who is the most merciful. And as it states, as the ayats read, well, this is the commentary, the Tasfir first. It states, Muhammad was inspired that a group of jinn have heard an amazing Quran. It calmed them, so they won't bind partners with the Rab. He is the Most High, Anu. The Jews used to utter Shat against Allah. The Elohim thought that the cherubim didn't utter blasphemies against the source. They are mortals from the Enocytes and mortals from the jinn. They are taught that the source wouldn't raise anyone. The skies were filled with strong Haras. Light beams will come to those who attempt to listen. The jinns admit they don't perceive if wickedness is attempted by the Zodokites. All right, so as the ayats read, ayat number 1 for Surah 40, and this is Gabriy'El speaking. So we're rereading this so we can get our foundation set for where we are. And I know we may have read this in a previous recording before the holidays, but this is post-holidays, and we want to make sure we get a full reading done. And chapter 40 is not really that long. So this is Gabriy'El speaking, and it states, O Muhammad, tell them this. I I have been inspired that a Nafar company of the jinn, malevolent disagreeable beings, cherubims, listened, and they, the malevolent beings, cherubims, the jinn, said, surely we have heard an amazing reading, the Qur'an. Calmness leads to the right direction. So we malevolent beings, cherubims, the jinns, have faith in it, the Quran, and we, the malevolent beings, cherubims, the jinns, will not associate partners with you. Oh, our Rob, sustainer, you are alone, and surely he not we, is the Ta'ala, most high, Anu, the majestic, our master, who is Rob, and he has not taken unto himself a sahiba, companion or girlfriend, and not a walad, son by birth. And surely a nation of fools or Jews from amongst us used to utter shatat, blasphemies, about the source, Allah. And surely we not he, the Elohim Anunnaki, thought that the Inosites and the jinns, malevolent beings, cherubims, did not utter blasphemies, lies about the source, Allah. And surely they were Rijal, mortal men from among Inosites, whom sought refuge with mortal men who are from among the human jinns, malevolent beings, cherubims. So they increased in their rahak, oppression. And surely they thought, as all of you thought, that the source Allah would not raise to life ahad, anyone. Surely we sought to touch the Sama'a, skies, so we discovered it to be filled with forceful haras, guards, the malevolent beings, cherubims, the jinns, and beings of light attacking benevolent beings, seraphim. And surely we, the malevolent Inosites of the jinn Inosites, used to squat in the squatting places in order to listen. So as for him who attempts to listen, now he will find a shahab, flaming beam, coming at him. And surely we, the malevolent beings, cherubims, the jinns, don't perceive if wickedness is intended by those in the planet Earth, Qui, Adamites, Zacharites, or whether their Rab, master, intends to direct them rightly. So this next top field commentary states, the seraphim are perfectionists. The Elohim thought that the war in the skies was over. He who has faith in his Rab has no fear for a loss. There are peacemakers and unjust ones among the Anunnaki. The unjust ones will be Hatab for Jahannam. If the Meccans stay upright, they will be given abundant water from the Elohim. Whoever disregards the test will have a severe azab. The masjid are for Allah alone. When Abram called out to his Rab, Nimrod's Inosites almost stifled him. Abraham said he doesn't associate any with Allah. So the ayats read starting at ayat 11. Surely from us, the benevolent beings, seraphims, are al-salahun, the ones who perfect themselves. And those who are other than that, the malevolent beings, cherubims, the jinns, we seraphims and cherubims have karat, many ways. And surely we, the Elohim Anunnaki, thought it over, the war between the Elohim Anunnakis in the skies. And we, the malevolent beings, cherubims, won't escape the source, Allah in our art, the planet Tiamat, Qui, or Earth. And this is talking about the 200 fallen malevolent Elohim Anunnaki. Nor will we, the malevolent beings, cherubims, escape him by fleeing from him. And surely when we, the malevolent beings, cherubims, heard the calmness, the Qur'an, we had faith in it. Thus whoever has total faith in his Rab, sustainer, he has no fear of box, loss, nor of oppression. And surely there are some from among us, the Elohim Anunnaki, who are peacemakers, the benevolent beings, seraphims. And also from amongst us, there are the unjust, malevolent beings, the cherubims. But as for those who surrender in peace, these are those of you Inosites who seek the right direction. And as for the Kasitun, unjust ones, the ones who swerve from justice, They will be the Hatab, fuel of Jahannam, purgatory. And if they, the Meccans, stay upright on the way, the pathway, we not he, we not he, Elohim Ananagi, will give them drinking water abundantly, for they will be tested in it. And whosoever disregards it and is neglectful about remembering his wrath, he will make them undergo a severe azab, pain. And surely the masjid, place of prostration, are for the source, Allah alone. So don't call out to anyone in conjunction with Allah. And surely when the Ab, slave of Allah, Abraham stood, rose up, he, Abraham, called out unto him, the source. Then they, Nimrod's Innosites, surrounded him, almost stifling him. Abraham, tell them this, surely I only Adu call out to my Rab, and I do not associate anything with him. All right, so this is the next Tatsfield or commentary. It states Muhammad says he can't harm or calm you. He doesn't find any protection except in Allah. It is a balak from Allah. They will see who is the weak aider. The source is the knower of the unseen. The source will make a guard pass between his hands. For those who choose from his one sent, the source is aware of what is in their possession and takes account of everything. So starting from ayat 21, it states, tell them this, Muhammad, surely I myself don't possess in my power the rulership over you and can't harm or rightly direct you. So this means Ahmad has no power except from the source. Tell them this, Ahmad, surely I, Muhammad, will not find protection from anyone besides the source, Allah, and I will not find a place of refuge except in him. It is nothing except a balagh, propagation of facts from the source, Allah, and his Rasulat, messengers. And whoever disobeys Allah and the one sent by him, his Rasul, surely for them is the fire of Jahannam, purgatory. In it they will reside eternally until they see what it all adds up to. So they shall learn who is Ada'af, weak aider, and has less in Adad, amounts. Tell them this, Muhammad, if I could but perceive whether Akarit it is near to what it all adds up to be, or if he, my Rab, is making for it a lengthy term. Alim, knower of all Gab, the unseen things, thus he does not manifest the hidden things that are his to anyone, except for he whom Artada chooses from the one sent by him, his Rasul. So surely he makes to pass from between Yadehi, his hands, and from Kafihi, behind him, are Rasad, an ambush, for him to know that indeed they, the news bearers, prophets, delivered the messages of their Rab, who is sustainer, master, and he is fully aware of all that is in their possession, his news bearers, and he takes account of Sheik, everything. Surika Allahu El Azim. So we're going to continue on with chapter 41, which was revealed in the year 617 AD, except for verse 45. And this is called Ya Asin, O Seen, O Secret. And its original order is 41, and they changed it in the mistranslation to 36. So we're going to pick up that next week. But I definitely see how what we have read so far resonates with what we, mentioned today. Don't get caught up and the dogmas. Don't get caught up on the wrong path. You're on the slippery slope, right? And you can see how the disagreeable ones, they heard readings from Ahmad of Muhammad, Mustafa Muhammad Al-Amin, peace be upon him, heard him reading the Qur'an, and they had a change of faith, or they got locked in. Like, hey, nah, hey, we see, we hear, we listening, we understood. the spirit of understanding came upon us. So this is where, the things we talked about, and there's a lot of dogmatic things that go into what's considered Orthodox Islam. So if you're not understanding that is the Qur'an and the pristine pure Islam is based on a continuation of the teachings from the Torah and the Psalms and those seven seals, those seven seal books, and the knowledge that came through Solomon, that came through Abraham from Chaldea. And those are just writings about Abraham from Chaldea. The knowledge that came through Moses with the Torah, and that knowledge is coming out of the ancient book of the dead. So the whole Judaic perspective, especially even Christianity, still to this day, those teachings come out of that Hotep, that Hotep brother that they be hating on, right? That Hotepism that they be hating on, right? That, you one of them Hoteps. And you one of them, one of them grand rising brothers. Good morning, sister. Yeah, uh, the the names that we come up for each other, and it really don't even be real insults. It just be a dry term with an insulting tone behind it. It's really more so the tone you put behind it than anything, right? And these dogmas are the things that we end up with today. And these are the disagreeable ways that we're talking about. But like I said, there's plenty of that, and all cultures, all backgrounds, you know, misunderstanding of what the messenger of that community had to bring, the discipline that messenger had to bring, and the reason why that person or particular individual rose to the ranks of being considered an avatar. Now, this is different than being a thought leader or an influencer on social media. This is someone that really was trying to make some moves. And this is why before we close out, we're gonna make sure we really jump into the powernomics from Professor Claude. And if I can get access to Thomas Sowell's books, I'll do that as well. So with that, we're gonna jump right into our holy instructions, so we can close out at our respective time for tonight. And we're gonna pick back up with 41 next week. So as we do here every week, we go over our civic education, which is the study of the theoretical, political, and practical aspects of citizenship, its rights and its duties, which includes the study of civil laws and civic code, and the study of government, but we're more focused on the role of world citizens as opposed to the external factors of the actual government itself. And that comes with what we're doing by studying the religious principles and the science, because this is about you and you as an individual, not just the divine and national movement. Yes, you get to learn about that, but that is made up by individuals. We have to understand the external factors of a government is made up by the individuals who make up that governmental body. So with that being understood, we touched on our civic virtues, which is the cultivation of our habits that are important for the success of communities. And once again, that goes back to these faith-based principles that we're touching on here throughout the night, as well as our civic engagement, which is also the process people take to come together to discuss these issues and address them, which is what we do here. We come together to talk about current events and things that are happening the now time in real time, and what we're dealing with as a people. So as y'all know, Friday is the holy day. Oh, you who know, when the call is proclaimed to supplication on Friday, the day of assembly, Hasten earnestly to the remembrance of the Heavenly Father and Divine Mother, and leave off business and traffic. That is best for you if you but knew. And when prayer is finished, then may ye disperse through the land and seek the bounty of God and celebrate the praises of God of 10 and without stint, that ye may prosper. All chaplaincy temple services and meetings are to be open and closed promptly according to the Circle 7 and love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Friday is our holy day of rest because on a Friday the first man was formed in flesh, and on a Friday the first man departed out of flesh and ascended unto his Father God Allah. For that cause, Friday is our holy day for all Muslims and peacemakers all over the world. This is according to Act 2 of the Divine Constitution and bylaws by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, which states all temples and subordinate temples are to conduct holy day services every Friday, starting promptly at their respective time and ending promptly at their respective time. All civilians, patrons, denizens, prospects, and ministers are expected to attend the temple for the Friday holy day temple service and meeting. On Fridays, the Moorish American, Moorish Asian, and Moorish African Muslims and peacemakers all come together to supplicate and to illustrate that which Allah has blessed them with. The temple services are open according to divine love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. At no time will templars, adepts, ministers, patrons, or outside congregational guests be allowed to disrupt the holy day service. Nor will civilians be admitted under the influence of alcohol or any severe intoxicants. All templars, adepts, and civilians attending the holy day service must have their heads covered with either a turban, fez, or kufi, or spiritual covering. Baseball caps should not be worn in the temple or during temple service. The Sunday school temple service and meeting is mandatory, and all Moorish national templars and temple denizens must promptly attend the temple service and send their children to the Sunday school gathering. The teacher must conform himself and herself to the temple 101 questionnaire and let every civilian man, woman, and child exercise his or her 5 senses who is able to do so, because out from your Sunday school comes the guiders of the nation and now the entire global village. According to Act 5 of the additional laws by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, every subordinate temple should have 2 Sunday school gatherings held. The first meeting should be held 1 to 2 hours before the adult service. Children's Sunday school should be conducted by a director of the Children's Sunday School and programs. The Sunday school gathering is designed to assist the temple in learning the Temple 101 questionnaire and developing an understanding of just what these holy keys mean and how they are to be applied to our everyday lives. The Divine Constitution and bylaws, along with the Moorish prayer, the Holy Covenant of the Asiatic nation, El's Holy Injiyl, El's Holy Qur'aan, and the civic editions or lessons of the Holy Temple of Moorish Science are also subjects of major concern for the apprentice who is trying to complete his or her mandatory requirements for pronouncing their temple civilianship and global nationality. All lessons for the adult Sunday school gathering must be prepared by a Grand Sheik, a divine minister, or an assistant Grand Sheik. Lessons called by us novites editions may be submitted to the apprentice for completion and returned to the temple. Once the lessons are completed and graded, they must be placed in the active members' temple district file. The Sunday school temple service and meeting is a wonderful opportunity to study the liturgy teachings of the prophet. No civilian is to become disruptive during the Sunday meeting. All templars must bring paper and pen to the temple service and meeting, along with the basic temple literature and assignments. No templars or patrons to eat food or other snacks during the temple service or meeting, but water is permitted. All templars must attend their Sunday temple service and meeting as diligently as they attend their holy day temple service and meeting. Both were called out for by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali and is required as a matter of temple law. According to the Divine Constitution, Act 7 in part, all templars must promptly attend their temple services and meeting and become a part and parcel of all uplifting acts of the Moorish Science Temple of America, and now also Moorish Science Temple of Africa and Moorish Science Temple of Asia, and in joining world islands on behalf of all indigenous peoples. For membership, any heads of temple of all temple jurisdictions are not to charge for naturalization or to overcharge for cards, buttons, or anything issued by and through the prophet. Those who contribute to any of the proceedings are not Moors, civilians, or patrons, but robbers. Temple nationality and membership in the Holy Temple's vast estate, public beneficiary trust, sisters and brothers, kin and kinfolk, is free, not only here, but all over the world. All kin and kinfolk desiring to become a civilian of a subordinate temple must follow these instructions from the temple secretary and acquire the application for naturalization, which can be found on our temple website when we get it back up, or with your temple secretary. The secretary of the temple's jurisdiction will help all newcomers by explaining the naturalization affidavit and application for membership in the temple's vast estate, or what we call a public beneficiary trust, to the new prospective civilians of the temple's vast estate or public beneficiary trust, and arranging for him or her to be consulted by the royal council of said temple or subordinate temple. The royal chairman or woman will set the date for the new temple prospect to be interviewed by the royal council. The new temple court civilian, upon completion of the royal council's consultation at the newcomers gathering, Sunday school gathering on Sunday, the new templars will proclaim their temple nationality at the next upcoming Holy Day temple gathering after the new civilian prospect proclaims his or her nationality. They will be given the mandatory requirements necessary to earn their free national name and royal title of nobility as a true American royal. These requirements are as follows, and in accordance with chapter 47 of the Moorish Circle 7 Holy Quran, called Egypt the capital dominion of the Empire of Africa. Chapter 25 of the Moorish Quran, called the Holy Covenant of the Asiatic Nation. The Moorish Prayer, including the 101 Quran questions for Moorish Americans, Asians, and Africans. The Divine Constitution and bylaws, the additional laws, and the precepts, statutes, and ordinances from El's Holy Torah, El's Holy Injiyl, El's Holy Qur'aan, the Holy Tabernacle Family Guide, and also the Holy Tablets through our Civics 101 course in the Global Interdependent School District and Sacred Halls of Learning, which is called New University by us of the Holy Temples of Moorish Science, for everyone of the Global Village. Once a new civilian or template has learned these additions or lessons verbatim or to the best of their ability, he or she will be interviewed by the Temple's Royal Council as the chaplaincy to determine if the new civilian is qualified to represent himself or herself as a faithful Moorish American, Moorish African, a Moorish Asian Muslim, or any indigenous peacemaker, and communicated to the ignorant for their instructions, and communicated to the wise for thine own improvement. Once a new civilian or template has cleared the mandatory requirements with the Royal Council, he or she will be naturalized by the Grand Sheik and Divine Minister of said subordinate temple. True peace. So this is simply how you get involved with a temple. Some temples may have a slight difference, but it's just that simple. So if you come across these videos and you're listening to what we offer from the temple perspective, it's simply that. It has nothing to do with the sovereign citizen processes and patriot movement things and all that stuff. You throw that stuff to the wayside. It's a meeting with the Royal Council, same way they do in any authoritarian form of governmental structure, and we are definitely not a part of those temples that are structured that way. We have no hate or anything like that. We have is all respect, all the love, true peace, freedom, and justice on our end, but we definitely do not function that way. And we definitely teach the fundamentals of civics and why it's important to proclaim your nationality, beside the other things that people get into, when it comes to those movements and other structure. And we definitely make sure we deliver a sound fundamental structure, and we have a lot of it on recording that you can go back to. Now, last year we got into a whole lot of information, about how we conduct our affairs and how we're supposed to do that. And we do touch on law and things like that from time to time, but we're not talking about these things as if we're above the law, and or we're one man living on an island, one man, one woman living on an island mentality that that comes with those movements. So much respect to other temples and branch temples and branches of the divine and national movement. Much respect to them, but if we do things a little different, like I said, we stick to the fundamentals. And it is known that we have the public and lawful acknowledgement as a sovereign theocratic government. Don't believe the prophet. That is your issue. You can check out HR 0689. You can check out HR 1203 from Georgia. And what better way to affirm that we are a sovereign theocratic governmental structure than looking up the laws and it being acknowledged in the state of Illinois, right where the Mecca is for the divine and national movement. Because you have some of those that don't believe that we are a governmental structure, or the prophet didn't put in place a government body, a statehood body, and that is definitely far from the truth. And with that, we're gonna get into our mandatory literature, and we're gonna close out for tonight. True peace to everyone who came through. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, Grand Sheik Dr. Lawiy. And we're gonna get our last contributions after we after we go over our literature here, and then we're gonna close it out for tonight. But we're gonna jump right into the mandatory literature from the prophet, the litanies, the mandatory litanies from the prophet. All right, the prophet sends this warning to all peacemakers and Muslims, and this is to be read in every temple meeting and service. The prophet said, I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical speeches while at work, in their homes, or on the streets. Will for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your card at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are for love, true peace, freedom, and justice. And when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet, or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement, will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the laws laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the prophet Noble Ali, and if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet therefore is sending out the divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. True peace, Noble Ali. Yeah, so the prophet set up a divine and national movement, and this movement is eternal. This movement is eternal. So there's a lot of things that the prophet made reference to that you can really go and look at it for yourself, especially when we're talking about, we did a whole diatribe last week, me and Brother Jonathan, on nationality. So you want to check out Sermon 92, where we got into nationality real heavy and you know, really brought it home on the theocratical point. But you know, I came across that this week, so I really wanted to address that. Ran into someone who thought, you know, we came from another temple that was associated with the sovereign citizen thing, and you know, I'm like, well, I get your point on them, but hey, at the same time, you forgetting that we have the covenant of the Asiatic nations, and you know, we have our divine and national constitution. It's a constitution for a reason, because we are a theocratical government. We are a polity. We are what some people would consider a microstate, right? Or you know, similar to a papal state, like the Vatican, right, in Italy. And it would be the same thing for us here in America, publicly and lawfully acknowledged throughout the states. So when you want to proclaim your nationality as American and as royal American, same way you have the royal government within the British government, it's the same thing. Even though they're more on the secular side of things than religious side, but it's just simply the same thing. And there's a great lack of understanding when it comes to that. So we're gonna jump into this last warning from the prophet, this last message from the prophet, mandatory message from the prophet. And this is to be proclaimed in every temple meeting and temple service as well, Islam. The prophet say, I'm glad to know that I have a few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth and the divine truth. There's a host of jealousy about me and the movement now by the same people of our side of the nation that claim that I was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for our earthly salvation as American citizens, they are working every scheme that they can to disqualify me so they may take charge of the situation. I have notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors that attribute to the movement and uplifting funds. The ones that paid their divine respect to me and the movement will be remembered. That's why I'm calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance and I need it badly. Never before have I needed finance so badly as I do at present, so I can shove aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nations of the world would not recognize the movement without me, the prophet, being head. It has been proven by my works, which I have performed in the past few years. Prophet Noble Drew Ali, Islam. And the prophet said a lot right there. The prophet said a lot as American citizens. As American citizens. So if we follow the teachings of the prophet, then we know we definitely not we definitely not standing on some sovereign citizen principles, right? So with that, we're gonna take it on home. I don't know if you got any last contributions you want to make, Brother Jonathan.
True peace. I just know that there's a lot more to be said, and it's not tonight that's gonna happen. So yeah, keep showing up. True peace.
Islam, true peace. Thank you for being here. We're gonna close it out. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of y'all Friday. Happy holy day, and we'll try to get this up as efficiently as possible. It helps us to close in a good time. That way, I can get the meeting up on YouTube at a more efficient time. So with that, we're gonna take it on home. Y'all know how it go. Rise up, facing the east. 2 fingers up, 5 fingers up, feet at a 45-degree angle. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day through His holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. With that, we're going to call it a night. True peace and Wadu. See y'all this Sunday. If not, we'll chop it up and connect next Friday. Wadu.